Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call to order the Arvada City Council meeting for today, May 13th, 2025. Ms. Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Simpson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon?
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose?
Here.
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Here.
Councilmember Marriott?
Here.
Councilmember Rupert?
Here.
All right, thank you. We apologize for the late start, everybody. We were doing business upstairs and we just needed a little extra time to take care of that. We have one workshop this evening. It's going to be our 2026 water, wastewater, and stormwater rates and fees workshop. Ms. Jacqueline Rhodes.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Council. We have about 24 slides to get through, so I'll get right into it. I wanted to start by just saying thank you. We're here tonight to listen. We want to make sure that we're aligned with your priorities and that staff is headed in the direction that you want to see us head. Joined with me tonight is our business manager, Chris Gray, our utilities engineering manager, Mary Stahl, and our utilities services manager, Debbie Baumgartner. So they'll be available to answer any questions as well. We wanted to start this process early, so we're here early to again, listen, and we can redirect as we hear. So tonight's agenda, we're gonna, as we've been doing lately, we would like to recap some of the requests, questions that you've asked previously and provide a status update. Either we have information tonight or we'll let you know of the progress that we're making and what's still in process. We'll go through some background, high-level infrastructure system overview, our financial strategies and process, provide some project highlights, recap where we left things last year as to what you approved, and then really just listen to what feedback you'd like to see through this year's process so that you have the information you need to make your decisions. So in review, last fall, September, October, one of the things that we heard is that we don't need separate workshops to necessarily highlight the project activities, but we really want to acknowledge the large asks we've put forward and provide some success stories, really communicate back through our public channels, through our website, the Arvada report, and project highlights like these, what the status of our dollars at work are giving us. And so we have some of those highlights incorporated in tonight's presentation, and we'll continue to do that through our regular workshops. We're working on a request that we heard from you to evaluate the potential for a pumped zone surcharge. So as we update our rate models and look at some additional scenarios, we'll look at that increased cost of serving our pumped zones versus gravity distribution and what options could look like there. We heard very clearly we want a separate workshop and more information about the Stormwater Fund and projects, so we'll be bringing that back to you later this year. We have a few updates as part of our rates and fees process for the Stormwater Fund, but again, we can schedule a separate workshop to really dive in. And of course, when we talk about rates and fees, we want to talk about impacts to our customers and updates on our assistance programs. So we have some of that data to share with you tonight about utilization of our programs and some options that you've asked us to explore. Finally, we had some questions about not letting our balances get so high and look at possible ways to reinstate our shutoff process to help keep customers from reaching those extremely high balances. So we have some information on that tonight, and we do have an item coming to you on the agenda where we'll describe more in our code about what our process is and give you some data around what reinstating our shutoff process looks like. So that's coming. So high level, we have a large, complex system. There's some data showed here. Much of our system was built between the 60s and 80s and is nearing the end of its useful life. So we have a written level of service document and a long-term asset planning database that we use to help us make some decisions around what priorities, what the replacement cost is, and overall, what is next in terms of our risks. Of course, we want to make sure all of our actions are in alignment with City Council's strategic goals. There's very specific goals for modernizing our physical and technology systems, and we're in alignment. We have some internal implementation plans around those. But also importantly, we want to make sure we're serving safe, resilient, high-quality water and utility services, and that we're doing our master planning and we're developing implementation strategies that allow for sustainable financial practices. So we've listed some organization and service effectiveness services as well as infrastructure services that we believe are core and foundational to this work. We'll continue to link back to your plan. The prior City Council strategic plan really directed us to start some of this with our master planning work. And just for a little bit of history around some of the financial strategies that we're implementing and talking about today, in 2019 through 2022, we were able to complete a water system, a sewer system, treatment, and stormwater master plans. We came and presented to you some of the findings from those plans in 21 and 22 and talked through some alternatives and an ultimate roadmap to meet the needs of plan development and continue to manage risk so that we can maintain resilient systems when it comes to rehabilitation and rehab projects. So how do we do that? We do that through a combination of adjustments to our annual rates. We also have our fixed service fees that we've been steadily increasing since 2022. From a growth perspective, system development charge adjustments that we went through a process with you in 2023 on. And then there was the 2022 bond issuance of $50 million on the water fund and $50 million on the sewer fund that we've been steadily spending on our projects that we'll provide some highlights on tonight. Before you next week is the public hearing on our 2025 series of bonds that when we do our rate recap tonight, we had planned for in last year's rate approval process. And of course, we've been talking about this being a long-term roadmap and that future issuances and strategies need to be implemented. Of course, our team continues to look at other funding mechanisms. We did submit for some congressionally directed spending projects for our North Trunk Line and continue to track other opportunities for our projects. Just as a reminder here, our philosophy is that growth pays for growth-related projects and repair and replacement or R&R projects are paid through rates and fees. The funds are somewhat different in terms of the water projects that were identified in our CIP versus the wastewater fund projects. On the water fund side, the majority of these are growth-related. About 75% of our project value compared to 25% on the R&R side. On the wastewater side, this is somewhat the reverse. So while we do have aging infrastructure, the majority of some of our capital-related expenditures are also related to serving the capacity needs for plan development.
Are the colors switched then on the left? Is that correct? I heard you say for the water, most of it is growth-related, and I'm seeing 25% being the smaller percentage.
I'm sorry, I said that backwards.
Okay.
The figure is correct on the slide.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies. Thank you for that correction. So oftentimes we'll bring before you what we call our one-pager for each fund, where we've listed out capital project priorities in the 10-year plan. We've prioritized these in red and yellow categories for criticality, and we've tried to map out the spending and implementation. We've also identified through that one-pager how much of those projects are capacity-related versus R&R related. So I'm going to hand it over to Mary Stahl at this point to talk through some of our project planning and highlights.
Thank you, Jacqueline. As Jacqueline noted, in the late 20-teens, Council gave direction in the strategic plan to perform master planning on most of the major systems, and specifically water, wastewater, stormwater, and treatment. These results came in between 2020 and late 2022, except for the water supply plan, and all of the areas showed significant needs related to regulatory, replacement and repair, growth, and capacity. And specifically on the slide, as we've talked about, we need to replace a water treatment facility, and we needed major work at the other treatment facility. Water distribution side was need for piping and storage is not cheap. The wastewater collections, we've all had lots of discussions about that, and many of you went on the sewer tour for the North Trunk Line. The stormwater system has extensive areas of missing and undersized infrastructure, and then the water supply report is wrapping up this year. So the master planning reports identified many, many needs, and the work and information in those reports was used by the Arvada team to prioritize areas, develop projects, and identify the financial needs, which then led to the roadmap that Jacqueline mentioned. And then the Arvada team, we've been here a lot of times to talk about this. None of this is new. But where does that put us in 2025? So it means that we have done quite a bit of work. And the last time I spoke to you in March, more than one of you mentioned that I'm not very good about listing what we've done and what has been accomplished, and I actually took that to heart. I'm not. I am a check it off and move on, and I recognize not only is it important for you to celebrate and recognize what's been done, but it's important for our teams. My team, the operations teams, these projects are hard. They're not easy. They're in congested areas, many times not our jurisdiction, with difficult permitting. So let's celebrate what got done. So thank you for pointing that out. I'll start with the water projects and the water fund. And listed here are really big projects, like the Ralston Water Treatment Plant Filter and Solids Project, and fairly small projects, like the 3.5 million gallon tank project. These projects represent everything I talked about on the previous slide as being capacity-related, regulatory-related, growth, R&R, resilience. All of these projects hit those. Most of them hit more than one of those. So what is a report on the completion of all these projects without some pictures? Pictures you haven't seen before, in part because we haven't been doing the bond updates once the road side has been on pause. So the project on the left is an example of a regulatory project. It is the lead and copper rule improvements requirement that we remove all lead service lines in the system. And so this is a picture of a lead service line in Old Town being removed, and specifically that big giant pipe, that's not the service line. This particular customer also got a new meter pit. So the piece of infrastructure that the meter itself sits inside. Picture on the right, on the top, is the 3.5 million gallon tank baffling project. And this project was super, super interesting. It's one of those that you hear about these kinds of things at conferences, never think you get to do them. We got to do it. And this is really a resilience project. This tank was built in the 90s, so it's relatively young. And by putting the baffles in, it allows us to provide disinfection with just that tank, not both tanks. So it's really about resilience, because the tank that's next door to it is from 1962 and is at end of life. So this gives us that resilience for when that tank begins to fail. It's fine right now, and we're continuing to use it, but we wanted to be planning for the future. And then the picture on the bottom is one of the last pictures from the Filter and Solids project. I would like to stop and say, we are in warranty. How exciting is that? Moving on to the wastewater
If
side.
I might, Ms. Stahl, thank you for explaining why we needed the baffling project.
Yes.
Because I think that that is really important for the disinfection of our safe drinking water. And a lot of people don't know what that means. So thank you so much for
Yes.
doing that.
Absolutely. So on the wastewater side, our focus has really been on the interceptors, as I've been up here talking many, many times and planning around those interceptors. The sewer work was not as far along when we took out the bonds as the water work. We knew that from the beginning, but we have been working diligently on that and have gotten fairly far. And a consequence of that is that the annual projects we've been doing for about 15, 20 years of what we called our annual open cut and our annual cured in place pipe took a back seat for a couple of years. But we did complete one in last year. It was the 2023 list, but got completed last year. And then we do have 3 interceptor projects that are essentially complete. I want to take us back to the spring of 2022, and I stood up here and I said, the North Trunk Line results are rather alarming, and we have 4 critical areas. And those 4 critical areas were segment 4, which was the Lake Crest Park. That is done. In fact, I know, isn't it amazing? It was Alkire Lift Station, which is not listed on here because these are reflecting bond funding, and Alkire Lift Station was paid for by Jefferson Center Metro District. But Alkire Lift Station is done and has been in operation for some time. And then it was Sheridan and Tennyson. And Sheridan, Tennyson, if you are not driving that part of town very often, have made it very difficult to drive that part of town. They are in construction. Super excited. The contractor for each, both contractors are telling us, they're both saying 6 months. I'm saying 6 to 9 months. They are very congested areas. We might find things as we move along that are unexpected. But super excited. We are in construction on those.
Thank you for the timeline on that. I've already had a few questions about Sheridan, so I appreciate that.
And it will be a traveling traffic control, if that makes sense. So in other words, as we complete areas, the traffic control will continue to move north. And then Tennyson, the traffic control is actually going to flip-flop some because we've had to change construction phasing as we continue to work with the railroads. So, but what got lost in all those conversations about the North Trunk Line, because they were alarming results and there is so much growth on the upper end of the North Trunk Line, was that the results on the Central Ralston Trunk Line, the piece that serves the middle part of the city, were actually just as alarming. We just didn't have the growth pushing us on dealing with them. And specifically, Central Ralston Trunk Segment 6, which is Danny Kendrick, did have some risk for overflow, and more importantly, had a pipe that had failed. We will be in warranty within a couple of weeks, so also complete. And then Central Ralston Trunk Segment 7, which is Davis Lane, was actually also at risk of overflow. Again, but we didn't have quite the growth pushing us as we did on the North Trunk. But it is also going to be in warranty within a couple of weeks, so super exciting. So I want to give a little bit of preview of, I'm told I tear up roads really well, anyway, of what's coming up. And what is coming up is on the North Trunk. The next major segment is what we're calling NT23, and the Alkire Force Main, I believe, is the name of the bid that's currently posted. And that will take the flow from the newly improved Alkire lift station, and it will also take the gravity flow from the west side of Candelas and the Trailstone development. And as I said, that is currently out to bid right now. And then the next piece on the Central Ralston Trunk is what we're calling Segment 5-6. It's kind of the upstream end of Segment 6. It was a better place to stop, not quite where it had been shown. And then Segment 5. And the RFP for design on that should go out to bid in the next month or two. And I want to give a huge, huge, huge shout out to the engineering team. They did a super extensive alternatives analysis on that Central Ralston Trunk 5-6. And we managed to come up with an alternative that we will not be doing construction in a developed park. That should make everyone happy. It makes me happy. We will be in road. We will be in Gibbs West, which is open space, but we will not be in developed park. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the pictures on the wastewater side. So I would love to show you other pictures of what I talked about, but they're harder to show. NTL4 has been done a while, and CIPP it just looks like this funny, weird sock thing outside the maintenance hole, and it's not until it gets in the maintenance hole that it gets cool, but you can't take pictures of that. So that cured in place pipe is, you put what looks like a sock in the pipe, and then you steam it, and it blows up and cures in place and becomes a new pipe. Anyway, we have some pictures from Davis Lane and Danny Kendrick here that are pretty similar to other ones you've seen. And I hope the next time I talk to you, I have a phenomenal picture headed north on Sheridan. It is quite the sight. My jaw dropped. So if you haven't done that drive, you should. You can see your money at work. And with that, I will pass it off to Chris.
Thank you, Mary. And to continue with the theme, we'll talk a little bit about the Stormwater Fund. So some of the projects completed in recent years, again, thank you for adopting increases to fund these. We've done a lot of work with drainage improvement projects, and as a reminder, these are a combination of local drainage issues that the city team finds, as well as community feedback about things in the neighborhoods and parts of the city that we don't necessarily see, but they do, and they bring it to our attention. So projects like the 69th and Indiana storm sewer replacement, there was a sinkhole repair at 60th and Newland, and then corrugated metal pipe replacement across the city. That was a very popular product to use in stormwater. It does not last a long time, and when it fails spectacularly. So that's what the team has been working on. There is a matrix that is used by the team to identify which are the most important and the most impactful projects to complete, so that we're doing projects that have the biggest community impact across all of the city. Some other projects that are completed are the Lake Arbor improvements, and then the Ralston Creek at the Croak Canal Crossing. Both of those were in partnership with Mile High Flood District. So I'll show you a couple of pictures of those. Lake Arbor was a very big project. If you recall, we dredged the smaller pond. We did a lot of embankment protection and then erosion prevention. And then Ralston Creek is going to be finished by the end of this year, and that is upsizing the channel, creating a bridge that will address higher flows, and then some trail safety improvements are coming. So a recap of what we talked with you about last year for the 2025 rates and fees. So during the annual budget process, we review all of our expenses to make sure that we are projecting appropriately what we think the costs are going to be, and then model those for rate and fee increases. We look at staffing to make sure that we have the appropriate number of people doing the work. We look to see if there are any backlogs that are out there that we need to address from a staffing perspective. We look at our capital improvement plan, our CIP projects, and you're very familiar with those. I think it's a combination of both aging infrastructure and then, again, capacity for plan development. As has been mentioned earlier, we have the one-pager, which is a very large spreadsheet of all of the projects that we are planning to do for the next 10 years for the water, sewer, and stormwater funds. And then, as we talked about earlier, we color code those by criticality, red, orange, and yellow. We refine those costs annually, so we have just kicked off that process internally with updating this one-pager document, and we will use that as we move forward, talking with you about scenarios for rates and fees. From an operational perspective, we pass through our operational increases from our partners, Metro Water Recovery, who treats all of the wastewater in the Front Range, or a vast majority of it, and then Denver Water, who supplies Arvada with about 75% of the raw water we use for our drinking water. And then, like every other department in the city, we have internal service funds, so those would be vehicle funds, computer funds, and then our overhead payments to the general fund for the services they provide to the utilities. We do our annual spring and summer budget hearings with finance and city manager's office to explain what are the things we want to take forward and bring to you for funding. And then we take your feedback, which that process starts now, incorporate that into the scenarios that you direct us to provide, and then we keep that conversation going throughout the rest of this year. The rate and fee adoptions, if you recall, are concurrent with that budget adoption process. So when Brian brings forward the budget adoption requests in October, we also on the same evenings bring forward the rate and fee requests. And then those fees are effective January 1st of the following year. So the next 3 slides are going to show some information that we presented to you last year in order: water, sewer, and stormwater. The graphs show historic increases and then projected increases as we anticipated them last year. So along the bottom, you'll see 2010 through 2034, and along the left axis, you'll see a total percentage increase. On the left side of that large black bar in the middle of the chart, you'll see the blue dotted line, which are the historic increases from 2010 through about 2024. And then the first red dot on the right-hand side is the 2025 rate and fee increase that was adopted last year. Everything else to the right of that is assuming a full funding of all capital improvement projects. And we do that to show you a very conservative estimate of what rates and fees could look like going forward, so that you can see what a high end could look like for rate and fee increases that we would bring forward. That is all based on information that we had last year. As a reminder, again, we update this document regularly, so we'll have latest and greatest information for this process going forward. And I believe it was Councilor Ambrose last year, you pointed out that the out years are very low as far as what's needed for increases, and that's because we don't have any projects programmed that are large enough to make the rates go up. What's important to notice on this document is not only what's on it, but what's not on it. And so while we plan 10 years out, there are some projects that are just on that next year, like the Ralston plant. We'll look at replacing that sometime, starting that in the mid-2030s-ish through 2040s. And so that's just out there off the edge of this chart. So this year, as we move forward, we'll have some different information. It may or may not look just like this, but it'll be perhaps similar. Part of what the 2025 rates and fees covered is enough revenue to pay for the debt service for a $90 million revenue bond. And as Jacqueline mentioned, we came to you last week for first reading. Next week is second reading for that. We are still planning on approximately $90 million for the water fund, and that will cover a number of large ticket items for the next 3 years. We have about 36 months to spend that money, and we have certainly enough projects to do that with. So those projects will include things like some important water line replacement projects that we need to move forward, the Arvada water treatment plant replacement project. That is a very large project for us. We're in design right now, and we'll move into construction in 2027, so those funds will cover part of that.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So you're saying, you said 90 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So next year, or what could be coming in front of us for 2026 is about 11.29, I think, or I think that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that will cover all of our debt financing to pay for it.
Yes, for all of our existing and what's issued this year.
And so the increases on the following years, could you remind me what those would be used for and why we need over 10% increases for the next following 4 years-ish?
So what we're looking at for the one-pager list of projects is primarily in the next several years, the water treatment plant replacement project.
But isn't that included in the 90 million that you just said?
That is part of it. So one of the other things that this, thank you for pointing that out, that this projection also includes is debt for future years. So not only is there $90 million programmed into 2025, we have $150 million programmed in for 2027 and another $150 million programmed in for 2029. And that will cover the rest of the water treatment plant project. So the 11.29% covers our existing debt service, the 2022 issue, as well as the 2025 issue. And the out years, those increases would cover the debt that we included in the modeling going forward.
Yeah, I want to be cautious about that. I'm a little nervous because if you think about 2032 and what we pay today, and you do 10% on top of 10% on top of 10% on top of 10% on top of 10%, it's going to be unaffordable to even have water. And I get it's exciting to replace those pipes. She loves to tell us about that. We also need to make sure we understand it completely, because I feel sometimes we don't put this kind of money in our streets either. And this is a lot of money. If you're saying that's 90, then 150 million, and another 150 million, another 150 million, I don't even think we've even got remotely close to that on any other asset. Not saying it's not important. I just need to make sure I'm understanding it, because we're going to get to a point where the bills are going to be really, really high. And I know we look and compare to other cities, and I like when we're on this end of the chart, but now we're in the top 4 or 5, and I was trying to look at what the median is, not the average, and seeing what that is starting to show. I think we should see both, because now we're in the top 20% of how expensive it is for our services. So I want to be thinking about that as we go through this, and maybe better understanding on our forecast of our debt. I mean, if we're trying to clear the whole list, well, I got a whole list from 20 years ago from the CIP committee that says we should have done these $500 million worth of projects too, and we're not doing those. So I just want council to kind of think about this, because is this where we put all of our debt, or is there other strategic assets that are also being neglected that need to be considered as we look at pulling out debt?
Councilmember Davis, you'd like to respond to that one?
No, not necessarily respond, but thank you for the presentation. I think that included in this, as I recall during a dinner, we were talking about we could spend $30 million over a period of time to address our drinking water infrastructure, or just wait for it to break and pay a lot more for it right now. And so what we're doing now is trying to plan into the future. Also, the unfunded mandates, which might go away from EPA, but the unfunded mandates of meeting certain safe drinking water actions and regulations makes it a little difficult too. I would actually posit that other communities are going to be going through the same thing. I do know that Aurora is going through the same thing. Their Cooper water treatment plant is almost 80 years old, and it's going to go through a huge retrofit. So they're going to have the same issues that Arvada is having on a much larger scale. They have 3 drinking water plants and are going to plan a 4th because of growth. So I think we need to, as I look at this chart and understand what water rates are going to be, we're not the only ones sitting in the stands. Other cities are going to be in the same boat with us. And then we look at the cost of infrastructure. Concrete's not cheap, and I think that in the past, what has happened is other councils may not have prioritized streets the way that now that we're looking at them and we're seeing the disrepair as we would like to see that done. Drinking water, fortunately, drinking water is a #1 priority for the city because we don't want to have a Flint, Michigan. So I think it's important that we update our infrastructure, that we're not wasting water because parts of our infrastructure are burping up every year, whether it's water, wastewater, or stormwater, and that we are saving and preserving an important part of our infrastructure while slowly and incrementally addressing other parts of our infrastructure. And I understand, Councilmember Pfeiffer, your frustration. I don't think all the debt is here. The debt's other places too, but I just wanted to give a measured and full picture of all of our core projects and responsibilities that we have. And as the city grows, water is king, and we need to preserve our water resources. And by the way, Ralston Central Park did exactly what it was supposed to do during the recent rains. It flooded. I got a lot of calls, and I said, isn't it better to flood in the park than in your house?
Councilmember Marriott.
I wanted to expand a little bit on what Mr. Pfeiffer was saying. So I think what this chart shows is that, financially by 2031, drinking water rates will be double what they are today. And so that's a significant imposition on a number of people. And so I wouldn't want to take that action casually. And we have to think about it not just from what's the best system we can have and how quickly can we get there and whatnot. We have to also keep in mind the welfare of people who live here who may not have the financial means to have their water double. And I don't think, a token assistance with one of your water bills gets it. That the reality is that it's important that we do everything we can to keep everybody's water bills affordable, not just try to sniff out some number of people who need assistance and try to give it to them. And so what this says to me is that, the financial plan and the construction plan need to be kind of synced up. That if the plan of constructing and replacing this infrastructure is going slower than the financial plan, then we're collecting more money sooner than we need to, which pushes rates higher sooner, which again hurts people. Now, if the plan that we've chosen to follow and the financial plan are synced and are going at the same pace, we kind of don't have, we have limited choices there. And so my question to you would be, is that the case? Are we on schedule with, these projects as we're going these projects along with the financial plan? Are they still on the exact same pace? Because, certainly these projects some are very big, a lot of lead time, a lot of construction time, a lot of closeout time, a lot of, there's lots of variables in what's the anticipated cost at the beginning, what's it actually cost, what are the unforeseen, there's all kinds of factors at play here. And as we go along each year, I would hope for us to have some kind of a feeling about, are we still in sync with the financial plan? Because, on one hand, getting more money sooner is good, but if it's just getting more money sooner to get more money sooner, we're harming people. And if it's, if our money's not coming in as fast as the plan is being executed, then we're harming the plan. And so we're trying to make both of those two things happen. So the question would be, are we in sync? Is the plan being executed at about the same rate as the financial plan is?
That is a good question, and that is actually something that we've been talking about internally, about how to structure rates and fees so that we aren't going too fast with rates and fees before the projects are catching up. I'll probably ping Mary to answer part of that question. From my perspective, we're close. I'm not sure we're 100% on. There are a lot of moving parts with projects, and it's also hard to not have the money there when we need it. Mary, would you add any more to that from your perspective?
I would love to. It's a great question, and we do talk internally quite frequently on it. It's one of the reasons, I know that in March I talked about using the CMGC approach and bringing a contractor on early. One of the reasons for that is to help us with syncing that, because they can, not only do they give us better estimates early on than an engineer can, they can also give us a much better schedule than any engineer can put together. And they can tell us the pros and cons of how early to procure long lead equipment, how early or how fast to start early construction packages versus, waiting till the very end of design. Do you do foundations first? And there's some good reasons to do it, including saving money. And we had the kickoff with the contractor yesterday, and so we are working very hard to keep them synced up. At this point in time, I believe we are pretty close, but that is one of the reasons as a team we structured 3 debt services, was to help with that. Is
Right.
that we can bring it forward or push it back as needed as we move forward.
Yeah. So I guess my comment to that, I appreciate that, and I think that's a good answer, and I think that's the accurate answer. Obviously, there's a lot that's unknown here. My impression, having, sat up here for a while, is the CMGC way of accomplishing these projects provides some certainty in some things, but it's not free. It comes at a cost, and that I guess I would just hope that depending on the project, we're paying attention to both sides of the equation. So like, it's great as someone trying to execute a project that, look, we're going to pay 10% extra, but we're going to have certainty of what the cost is, and we're going to have certainty of the schedule, and we're going to be able to sync it with all this other stuff, and at times, the extra cost might be worth it. But if it's just to make it easier for us, I would hope we don't always just fall to that and default to that we really strive to give the best value to the residents, because it gets ultimately reflected in the rates they pay. And that's really the overriding concern here, that if we take the easy route that leads to higher rates, it's easy to just say, well, whatever, they just have to pay it. But I don't want to, as a city council person, I don't want to have that attitude. I want to have the attitude of, we're going to do absolutely everything we can to keep the rates down. And, this chart's a perfect example. If the financial plan was ahead of the project plan, these percentage increases could be lower and go out further, right? So instead of being an 11% increase, it might be a 9% increase, and then that out year, that 2031 or 2032 year where it drops to 3%, that might be a 7 or 8% increase, and so you trade one kind of against the other. I think that's worth doing, it's worth looking at, and it's worth having that conversation. And obviously, you guys are doing that internally. But I think it's worth having that conversation with us, who are ultimately responsible to the voters for the water rates, that we're making good decisions each year when we approve a water rate increase. That kind of resets a baseline, and then next year's increase is on that baseline. So it's kind of this cumulative effect that it would be really good for us, I think, to have that as part of the discussion when we get to the part where we are talking specifically about the rates and not just where are we at. So I don't know if you have a way of doing that. I know it's super complicated to be trying to say, here's our construction plan, and here's our financial plan, and here's how they sync, or here's how they don't, or whatever. But I just want us to not be taking the easy way out and saying, look, as long as we've got the money here, we have more flexibility and freedom, so let's get the money, and let's just do everything CMGC because that's easier for us, and whatever. I mean, each of those things has an appropriate place, but let's make sure we're using them appropriately and not ever collecting a higher water rate increase than we need to.
I super appreciate that, and if you'd like, I can offer you two very discrete examples on how CMGC has saved us money, but only if you'd like me
Yeah,
to.
no, that's okay. I understand. Sometimes it saves money.
Yeah.
It's not always more expensive. But it's also, it's not the universal way that contracting is done
Agreed.
for a reason, right? I mean, there are places it's appropriate. There are other places it's not appropriate. And the only time it's not appropriate is it's a cost issue, right? It's not a execution issue or anything like that. It's a more expensive way to do it. At times, it's appropriate. And so I just want us to be cognizant that we're using it appropriately at the times that it is appropriate. And I understand, we've done it before, and I think we've done it appropriately, but we just want to always make sure that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a historical point as to why we're in the situation we're in, both recent history and further back history. According to Food and Water Watch, since the peak in 1970s, federal funding has dropped by 77% from 1977 to 2017. So a lot of these facilities that were built with federal dollars, and that's not happening again. We have to build it this time, and that's why we are facing really historical, huge increases in these utilities because we don't have that support like we did. And it is true, John, it's in Food and Water Watch. I can send you the citation. And if you would like to comment against me so that the whole public can hear you, that would be great. I would also like to say that recently we did not attend to this infrastructure for the last 20 years, which is another reason why we were talking about these water rates increasing so much, is because a lot of it has been deferred maintenance, like deferred maintenance on our roads. And I would also like to say more recently, we had hours-long discussions about these rate increases. If you look on these next three slides, it says projected scenario B, the next slide says projected scenario C, and the third slide says projected scenario C, because we were presented by the water team with three different scenarios, A, B, and C, and we as a council picked these specific scenarios because of the fiscal responsibility of trying to weigh best increasing the water rates and making sure we didn't have anything like waterborne illnesses, lead in the pipes, backup sanitary conditions, boil advisories like Flint, because looking at that one pager, this was A, B, and C where the scenarios presented to us to prevent those catastrophic failures that is represented by the red lines on those sheets. This is what we have to do, and we did have, I think, at least 2 other council study sessions and advisory sessions just about the rates alone, and I feel like we are rehashing that, and that is unstable for staff to go back and question, are these the right rates, when we maybe just don't remember that we have already had these discussions extensively about the rates, about the state of our infrastructure, why we're looking at it. And I think that the staff included these slides not to have them rehashed, but to remind us that this is what has already been agreed to that we need to do in order to make sure we don't have catastrophic failures across our wastewater, water, and stormwater systems.
Councilmember Marriott.
Thank you, and I want to answer Councilmember Ambrose, and I apologize, I meant no disrespect and didn't intend to be whispering behind your back when you mentioned that an article mentioned that, federal funding has changed. I think the type of stuff we're doing was virtually never federally funded, or if federal funding was part of it, it was a very, very small part of it. These historically have always been locally funded, almost exclusively. And if federal funding has dropped by 70%, it might have been 2% of the value of this, and it's dropped by 70%, it ends up being nothing. These are all locally done. Now, in the whole wide world of water, wastewater, and stormwater, certainly there's federally funded projects, but not in the city of Arvada, not city of Arvada projects that treat and distribute water to individual homes within municipalities, and I think that's virtually true for most everywhere in the country.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Marriott, for clarifying. I will cite my source. This is from the Congressional Budget Office, Public Spending on Transportation and Water Infrastructure, 1956 to 2017, that said that the Funding for water and wastewater infrastructure dropped 77% from 1977 to 2017, and that notes that that is a per capita decrease of funding of 84% for specifically water and wastewater funding. So I would be interested to know historically how much of the federal funding was available for Arvada to build this, because it was part of the Clean Water Act, part of the establishment of the EPA, part of a lot of federal fundings. And I think Arvada would not have passed up on federal tax dollars that were available back in the 50s or 70s, as just like we don't today.
Fascinating history lessons, absolutely worth looking into, but let's get back to the workshop.
I will speak to what Councilors Marriott and Pfeiffer both said. So noting that the red dotted lines that were the projected increases did include the fully funded CIP. So one of the scenarios we could bring back, I'm going to ask you for feedback in a few slides, is just funding the red, or just funding the red and orange, and funding all three, red, orange, and yellow. So you can get an idea of what those differences in rates and fees would be depending on the packages that we bring forward, and then also talk about what are the impacts, what are the consequences, because there are consequences to not doing some of these, but there are trade-offs. So we can bring those forward and give you an idea of what that looks like.
Councilmember Pfeiffer, you have a question?
Statement more than anything. We didn't say that these rate increases were going to be agreed on for 5-10 years. We said every year we'll evaluate those. And I just looked at the last 3 council meetings, and other than the last one, these numbers have changed. The first one showed lower percentages. This is higher, but we mentioned that last year. We also had a scenario B and C last year. We don't see that. We're only getting one option this year, which is, I think, C, or no, this B.
This was B for
This
water,
is B
yes.
for water. But we don't see C again, because I think we said let's go down the B path. But I think it's also expected that they do come every year, because council changes. This year it will change again, and there is some duplication in slides. It's a rinse and repeat, but it is okay, because our citizens, one, need to hear it. We need to have this debate, and every year we should reset the conversation to make sure we're on the right trajectory. I have no question in my mind that the water treatment plant has to be replaced. I just question some of the other things that are out there. I get we'd be proactive, but man, we have streets, we have other infrastructure that needs love. As well, and we are putting all of our debt capacity in here right now and not in other assets. So I think as council, we've got to look more broadly at all of our asset sets and look at asset management holistically. And you're in front of us tonight, so we're talking about the one subject, which is everything underground. But we need to be thoughtful when we talk about all of our assets, and just keep that in mind, that the checkbook's just not wide open. That's all. But thank you for pulling us through this. We probably should still have a historical on here on what we've talked about. Might have been easy to connect it from last year. So a little tidbit for next year.
Thank you, yes. The next slide is very similar for the sewer fund. So again, on the left-hand side of that bar are the historic increases. On the right is what was chosen as the fully funding all CIP priorities. So again, Councilor, to your point, that's just the one scenario that was adopted. Again, just for 1 year. So we will be coming back to you this year, at the end of the year, for 2026 rates and fees. That's just a picture of what it would look like funding everything going forward.
Real quick, one thought I have just for next year. It's really hard for the public to envision without the institutional memory of what these represent. If we could have some way to have like the dollar amount, there's a reason why we chose the budget book for the more expensive items, whereas this one, just for the watching public's wherewithal, these are very low cost. So if I can't remember off the top of my head, but 15.5% would be 80 cents, $1, something along those lines. So it's within that scale. So I just wanted to make sure we have that frame of reference so people know what that means for them directly.
Good point, we will add that
I
in.
agree. That would be very helpful for the public and for us, because 14% looks like it's a lot. But then when you look back at the dollars, for all 3 scenarios, I think each of them were fairly inexpensive, which is why we went with, I think a couple of them, we had a hybrid.
Well, keep in mind, I mean, I just looked at what we said in 23 to today. The annual bill's almost gotten $500 in 2 years. So it's not, it sounds 15% is a lot when I was just looking in prior to 2023, we were paying less than $800 or $700 total for all these services. Now we're projecting $1,200 and some change, 2 years. So think of 10% on that, 10% on that, 10% on that, 10% on that. It's going to be like $2,000 a year in like 2 or 3 years. So not that this is, I'm not saying this is wrong. Let's be real thoughtful through the impacts of it with other priorities. Oh, and then while I have the mic, do you remember last year you had the bar graphs that had the color, the blue, the green, the red? Can you bring those back next year? Because I didn't see it on the slide when I went through them. Are they on here?
There's one that shows the water, sewer, stormwater combined bill. Are you talking
not
about
that
the
one.
expenses one?
The expenses one, because remember, we put red in there because those were they could cross-reference back to the list of critical assets that need to be replaced. And if that red, if it was above the line and we didn't do it, that means those are critical projects we didn't do. So we could cross-reference it back to the project list. Do you remember the color codes to that? I think that's important. I don't know if you all remembered that, but that was a nice little line to give a graphical of like, hey, you're fine. You turn that dial down. This is where the chalk line is. This doesn't work. But maybe if you can bring that back, especially with all your accomplishments, I think that graph has probably changed with those recent accomplishments, and that might. And then how much we're paying for debt services, because we don't see that in any of tonight's presentation, but maybe in the next one we can see that.
And this is just the kickoff, so there's
Yeah.
more information coming. We've
next
structured
one.
this, well, potentially, because we've structured this like last year, where we have 4 workshops. This is the first one. So I have a question for you at the end of the presentation that's also, what would you like to see in the upcoming workshops?
Okay,
So-
then I don't need the mic after that.
A reminder also that, that this chart also shows that we had anticipated, and this increase was to fund a $13 million debt issuance for this year for the sewer fund projects. And those are as Mary was mentioning, the North Trunk Line, the Central Ralston Line, those are tied together. We can't separate those out because they are a combination of repair and replacement and capacity for plant development. So those are moving forward, and they are not yet completed. We have, I believe, another debt issue projected for 2027 to finish those projects. So we'll be talking to you more about that. The final slide is for the Stormwater Fund. Same setup. On the left-hand side, historic increases. On the right-hand side, you'll see that 2025, there was a 13.75% increase adopted to fund all of the capital projects. And then again, everything going forward, so the more conservative projection of rates and fees. We had anticipated issuing about $8.3 million of debt for this fund, and we put a pause on that while we did some reprioritization. We wanted to make sure that we had projects in place that were ready to move forward because we have such a tight timeline for spending bond funds. 3 years does sound like a lot, and by the time you get design and pre-design and design going, and then construction, that goes quickly. So we want to make sure we're putting those funds out there appropriately. So we're still working on it, but we'll probably come back for a 2027 bond issuance for the Stormwater Fund, but we have some more work to do. And the funds that are being generated by this increase, as I mentioned in the Stormwater project slides, we have a vast list of stormwater projects to move forward with. So we will be prioritizing that money to go towards those projects. This next slide is the typical 2025 single-family water, sewer, stormwater annual bill as compared to everybody else's comparison 2024 rates. This was last fall, so we didn't know all of the current rates and fees. And Counselor, to your point, we're at $1,209 for a combined bill for that typical bill, which is just under the average of $1,216. And you can see Arvada is there. It's the fifth down from the right with the box around the name. And we'll provide this graph again as we move closer to narrowed down scenarios for you. Assistance programs are available for our customers. We do have the list here, and we'll talk more about liens in a moment. They are not an assistance program, but they are part of how we manage our customers' outstanding bills. So you can see we had some federal funds available early on. Those programs were discontinued in 2024. We have payment plans that customers can enter into, bill equalization plans that customers can do where they don't pay a high bill in the summer, they equal out their their bills over the year and then true up on their anniversary date. And we do have hardship credits. And you'll see in 2024, we had 23 of them, which is a much larger number than historically we've given out. That is because we started marketing that program more obviously. So we updated the language on our website, and we started putting information on customer bills, and people noticed and took advantage of that. As mentioned earlier, we are going to come back and talk with you about the shut-off process, and that is partially to help our customers get that signal earlier than when liens take effect. We do send a number of accounts to Jefferson and Adams County for liens for unpaid bills, and we'd like to manage both customer bill amounts and the sheer amount of time and energy it takes for the staff team to process those liens. So that is coming forward in the next several weeks. We are following up on some information that you asked us to bring back some updates on as far as assistance programs go. So we are doing referrals to and from Community Table. They do not have any funding right now available to help customers with bills. So they are primarily helping their client base with food, but they are referring clients to the city. We are also looking to leverage the city's existing resident rebate program so that we can notify eligible customers that they can perhaps take advantage of our programs. So we're going to be working with the sales tax team to get that list of customers. We'll send out postcards to them, and if they're eligible, and they're interested, we can work with them to take advantage of our programs. And then we had talked a little bit about a roundup option for bills or a donation type assistance program that we could have people add $10 to their bill or round up from 43 cents to the next dollar. And we started talking about that work with our billing software vendor. We have a very large upgrade coming in 2027. And because we know that this program itself would take significant staffing time to make sure it's seamless to the customer, and as well as not difficult on the billing side, we want to make sure we do that right. So we're going to investigate that as we move forward with that upgrade. So we're not going to be able to produce something on that quickly, but it is something that's in our discussion list. So here's where we get to a set of questions for you. What feedback would you like us to hear? We've come to you early, sort of like we did last year. Our intent is to come back to you with a series of workshops ahead of adoption of rates and fees in October. So we have a July, August, and September workshop teed up. The next slide shows you those. But we're here to listen and to take your direction. So what would you like us to know when we come back to you and bring back to you?
Councilmember Marriott.
Thank you. I have a couple things here. So first of all, I was just going to ask you a quick question on, you had mentioned in the intro the galvanized service line replacement. Do you know where you guys are at on that? Is that something that will be completed this year, or is that ongoing just in a smaller way, or where does that sit?
I will give a partial answer, but I'd like us to also follow up on this
Okay.
because the program is being run by our water quality administrator. I believe the bulk of it is to be done in this year 25 and into 2026. However, the program itself, the lead and copper rule, I forget what the I stands for now, anyway, is an in perpetuity thing. And so we have provided some funding for some years out,
to go
but we
forward.
intend to get the bulk of it done within the next 12 to 18 months. But
Okay.
we'll follow up with that.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I want to talk about a couple things. So first, I want to talk about pumped zones. So I know we had mentioned that before, and that wasn't part of tonight's discussion, nor should it have been. But when we come back, I would really like to see us do that and do that seriously. And I think the reason why is I think it's clearly defined. It's clearly easy to do. That there are certain addresses in the city that their water is delivered from the treatment plant to them with a pump somewhere in between that gets it to them. And that just costs more money. It's the infrastructure may have been paid for by development itself, but that infrastructure will wear out. It'll need to be replaced at some point, and certainly the operation of that infrastructure. So the electricity that powers the pumps, the replacing the pumps, the servicing, all that infrastructure has a cost associated with it. And I think it's only just for that to be paid for by those who are receiving that service. And particularly here, it seems like it makes sense because, 25 years ago, I know we had some pumping, but it was a small percentage of our total water delivery. It's not now. It's a reasonable part of our water delivery, and that's where most of the growth has been, is in that. And they're kind of getting a free ride on the backs of mostly the older parts of town. And so, although not exclusively, I realize there's some of everything. So I would like that for us to actually do that this year, or at least have that brought forward in a way of, here's how much it costs us, we think, here's the plan to charge for that, whether it be in a higher water rate in a pump zone, or whether it be in a higher base fee, or a combination of those two, whatever makes the most sense. With that, I would have a question about, I know we have some wastewater that are essentially pumped zones, lift stations that move wastewater around. And I don't know enough about that to have an opinion about whether we should be charging a surcharge there as well or not. I'd love the next time we hear from you guys to get maybe just a little bit of kind of a lay of the land on that, about how much wastewater pumping do we do, or lifting do we do, and how much of the city does that affect, and what are the, again, particularly the one there off Alkire Street, that was paid for by the Metro District as part of that agreement. But the city owns it now, and the operations of it will come out of the ratepayers, and ultimately the replacement of the mechanical parts of that, which will need to be replaced, will come out of the ratepayers. And so, is it appropriate to have pumped zones on the wastewater side too? I don't know. I don't know to have enough information. I think on the water side I do. So I would ask that we see that come back. One of the other things we talked about was the water shutoff. Mm-hmm. So, I want to go back to that. I would encourage us to put that back in place. My experience with that has been, and I've dealt with Debbie on that a couple of different times with different tenants of mine. We're not doing people any favor by letting them get deeply indebted on their water bill. And the city doesn't have the ability to just forgive debt. Somebody ends up having to pay that. And if ultimately the property owner is responsible, if it's a rental situation and the landlord ultimately becomes responsible, the landlord's going to take it out of that person. And they are not served by allowing to get further behind. Now, if we do reinstate a shut-off program, I would encourage us to, also keeping in mind that these people who get behind on their water bill, they're struggling, and they're not just struggling for their water bill, they're struggling for everything. They're probably struggling with their utility bill and all kinds of different things. Given that we run our own water system, we don't contract it out, I would hope that we could have a plan that if we have to shut people's water off for non-payment of their bill, that we can turn their water back on for free. Like, what we're wanting them to do is pay the bill. We're not looking to find a way to punitively punish them. And so if somebody gets behind and struggles and can't pay their water bill, and their water bill gets shut off, and they figure out how to get it paid, hopefully it's a small amount because we've done it quickly, not waited a long time, that there's not a big penalty associated with it. In fact, it'd be best if there was no penalty associated with it, or a minimal penalty. So as we think about that as a policy, and it's a policy we've had in the past in the city, I would encourage us to think of it in those terms, that we're looking to get the water bill paid. We're not looking to punish people. And so, fees are that's hard. And we have people that operate our water system. I realize it's an extra task if they have to go shut somebody's water off and lock it off, and then it's another extra task for them to go turn it back on. But we also own their time. I mean, they're employees of the city, and they do the things that are necessary to operate our water system, and that can be a duty as well as anything. So I would encourage us to both do that, re-implement that, but implement it in a way that recognizes the reason people are mostly behind on their water bill, and it's because they're struggling, and we don't make it worse. So that's another piece I would like to see, when we bring it back. The couple of last things that would be a question. I know the Gross Reservoir is, currently in more litigation and maybe being delayed or maybe not. I know Denver Water is allowed to continue constructing at least to a point where they're, it's not just a reckless stop. They can at least keep going until they get to a reasonable stopping point. But I know at one time here in Arvada, we used, and maybe we just piloted it, but we used an old coal mine out by Leiden as water storage at one time. And I don't know how successful that was, but whether something like that's still available to us if this Gross Reservoir stoppage becomes something that really does become long-term, if that can be as part of our thing. And I'd love to, again, just know more of the lay of the land about that, the history about, yeah, we did it 2 years, it didn't work, it did work, we liked it, we didn't like it, here's the problem with doing it, or whatever, just so we know more about that to have as a possible future thing. So I'd love to hear more about that when we go forward. And then the last thing, I would say, this is just a comment. And that's, we have one of these charts that shows, Arvada's current rates and Arvada's proposed rates with these increases and how we stack up. And, I think, those charts are hard because there's 8 people on the chart, and how do you pick the 8 and all that kind of stuff. But I always get a little bit, I cringe a little bit when we're compared to, the city of Boulder or municipalities in Boulder County. I think comparing us and saying, well, we're cheaper than one of the least affordable cities in the least affordable county in the state is probably not who we should be comparing ourselves to. I think we ought to be striving for better than that. And obviously, we're all starting from different places, so we can't do that. But when we do those charts, I'd love to see them be bigger, maybe, just so that doesn't jump out at me so much that we have the, well, at least we're still cheaper than Boulder thing. I mean, that's not something I want to see. So just more of a comment than anything else, but that's kind of what I'd like to see. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ambrose.
My question is, or maybe you don't have the answer, so bring it back to us, but when we were shutting off people's water before, did that have the desired effect of people actually coming into compliance? Or do we have better ways of dealing with this? So that's one of the reasons why we haven't brought this program back.
So I believe, and I might ask Debbie to come up and answer that since she works on that primarily. In the past, it did have the desired effect because people came in and paid their bills. We stopped it during COVID because that was a pandemic and we wanted people to have access to water. I don't know if you have more you want to add.
It is an effective method to retrain customers to pay their bills as opposed to liens. People can afford a $150 bill, possibly. I mean, they still have hardships, but compared to $1,200 at the end of the year and then extra fees on top of that, it's an effective method that the Front Range uses. We are one of the only municipalities or localities that does not shut off water currently. Everybody pretty much resumed the shut-off process in 22, 23.
Is there a specific reason why we did not?
As far as I know, the director was not in favor of that.
Okay, I would love to see some more information about the advantages of resuming this program, like from a wider factual empirical data point of view about customer behaviors and effect on people in poverty and if it's doing what we think it's doing and things like that when bringing this aspect back.
We've got a lot of statistical data, yeah.
Okay, great. For the next presentation, I really enjoyed, well, I can't say enjoyed, I was really informed with the presentation before when there was clear consequences of what happened if we decided to not increase rates. The consequences and risks of the sanitation backup, of the stormwater floods, of the lead contamination, of the water illnesses, of the boil advisories, because I felt like it was very clear to me what the consequences were, because it does put us in, nobody wants to be the council member who's like, I doubled your water rates. Like, it just is not a good place to be in, especially as inflation is increasing and things are becoming more unaffordable. So having those clear consequences as to why we need to take this course of action is extremely helpful. And I also would like, maybe this doesn't have to be a city council session, but a 4 o'clock session, but a clear history of why we are at this point. Because I've asked before and I was told things before, but how we afforded this for so long, how we have deferred maintenance in this for so long, what we funded instead by choosing to defer maintenance on this, so that people can have a context of why we are where we are, and to also address Councilmember Pfeiffer's point about, okay, so we're debt servicing here. Where are we not debt servicing? Where are we deferring maintenance? And if we could have a more holistic presentation about this, and maybe this is more like a budget presentation, and maybe more even a historical budget presentation, because it could have been that while we weren't charging very much for water because we were deferring maintenance, we also weren't collecting very much in taxes. And we weren't, around us, we have a sales tax that is far below all the other cities around us, or 0.5% below. So that's one of the reasons why we have been deferring maintenance on roads or deferred maintenance on wastewater in the past, so that people can understand why it is at this moment in 2025 or in 2026, we have to raise it, and that we are being responsible decision makers at this point, when before, those decisions were not made, and we just can't put it off any longer. Why were we able to put it off in the past? I think these are some of the questions that council members have been asking.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
John, you make me chuckle about the pump zones, because it reminds me of like solid waste opt-out fees. John, makes me laugh. So the pump fees, I do have some comments around that. I wasn't going to say anything, because I already gave you what I asked for. But, we need to be careful with that, because I believe the metro districts have paid for some of those pumps, and that means the people that live there are already paying for those pumps. So let's be a little cautious thinking about fees for pump zones, because I believe the lift he's referring to, which is affecting most northwest Arvada, was paid for by JCMD, and the debt was passed on to all the sub-districts. So maintenance and operations, maybe not so, but let's just be cautious of what the service agreements are with the metro districts, because I believe with our new ordinances, and if they go under the new service plans, I believe that the city can demand capital funds, I believe, for regional significant projects, if I remember that right. I'm looking around. I don't know if anyone looks at that. But if somebody does open up their service plan, I believe we can ask for that money. So we just need to be careful about putting fees on top of a group that might already be obligated to already pay and already is paying for that. So let's be careful of that. Raw water pumping, no one should get a rate for that. That's just the city's intake. So I'm thinking you're just talking about the
Delivery.
The delivery of
Yes,
the water.
yes.
But I also would say is that if we talk about pump zones, I will tell you the number one complaint around water I have in my neighborhood is water pressure. So if they're going to pay for pump zones, they better expect pressure that the other parts of the city gets. Because I can tell you the people around me, and I'm into a zone, is barely getting 48 PSIs into the house. So if they're going to pay extra money, then they should have the same level of service that somebody that has gravity fed at 75, 85, 100 PSIs should get. So we need to be a little careful of putting fees on somebody that doesn't get the same service, opt-out fee. That's how, John?
Are we certain you're not having a lower PSI because your house is constantly showering?
No. Yeah, that could be part of it. But that changes in August. But no, everyone has pressure. They're all checking right at the faucet, right where the city comes in. Everyone's checked it. I know cities come out, check mine, check my neighbors. And it's just, I don't know how that works. I'm not smart with the underground stuff. Maybe some other people are about pressure and into zones and how that looks. But let's just be cautious when we go through those extra fees, because I can see my communities around that are hilly are all going to complain that, well, I'm paying more money but get less of a service. So still would like the project relationship to the graph. I think those are informative as well. And I appreciate the history. I've struggled with it too, because I've sat up here with John and, we did the 3%, 3%, 3%, 0%, 2%. Thought everything was happy. Come to find it wasn't. And I think it's hard to pinpoint what the fees went to and what projects were being done. I don't know. I mean, we were as good as the information we got. So I don't know how well it's going to come delivered. I'm just speaking of sitting up here, but I don't expect staff to know like the silver bullet on what happened 25 years ago, because like at the end of the day, it was a different time, different environment, and different directors and different city managers, and trying to do forensic on it could be challenging. But if you have some golden nuggets, hopefully there's some historical people still around that might just know some nuggets. I think that's a great information, because I wish we were ahead of this, because then we don't have to repeat this every year, 4 times a year, every year for the next 5-10 years. Yeah, until we're done. But no, I always appreciate it. You know, I appreciate we're at least having a crucial conversation around this, and I agree with Councilmember Ambrose about being able to explain the story. And you guys do a great job on your website. I just want to highlight, I appreciate the transparency. I appreciate what you put up there. Keep doing that.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes, and I think that history is very important, and I think I've taken it for granted because sitting on the Colorado Water Utility Council, the Wastewater Utility Council, and the wonderful Stormwater Utility Council, I've heard all these stories that Arvada has shared over the decades. And so, unfortunately, I just have that history just from the wonderful experience from some of the folks that are no longer with the city, but understanding where Arvada is coming from. I think that is really important, and I try to share it with as many people as I possibly can to just say that we made different choices in different times because other things were taking priority, and now the priority is water. Because before, I feel like the people who are coming to these water utility councils were not feeling like they were necessarily being supported by council. That's water, that's wastewater. You know, it's stuff you don't see, it's not sexy. And so streets are sexy because everybody sees them. And I think that, you know, it's just like maintaining your home. You don't worry about the toilet backing up until the toilet backs up. So I think that's how we got ourselves here, and now we're trying to fix it. But I think that staff are fixing it in a very thoughtful way and thinking it out through 2032. I mean, I don't even know what I'm going to do after we leave council tonight. So having that plan and being very thoughtful about it, I think is commendable, and thank you so much for doing this for the city and for the residents and the ratepayers.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation this evening and all the work that your team does. I will echo some of the comments made by fellow council members in regards to kind of what we'd like to see in the next presentations. I think to Councilmember Pfeiffer's point, bringing back the bar graphs that have the different breakdowns of colors of projects and what's going to be covered and not, I think is definitely useful to keep repeating and seeing that again to remind us and be able to remind the public what this all entails. I do vividly remember our last fall conversation, which we had the 3 different scenarios, and I remember spending a lot of time looking at what the impacts are and the choices we make on which scenario. And I remember choosing one of the scenarios because, well, while the price increase right now is going to be significant, it helps save in the long run that the price increases go down. And so I think that's part of repeating those conversations and reminding ourselves and the public of why we're making them. Because to Councilmember Ambrose's point, these are not easy conversations to have, and it impacts all of us and impacts our residents. So just to keep bringing that back, I think is useful. So thank you.
Councilmember Rupert, your first water workshop. How you feeling?
Okay, well, candidly, this is a conversation that I recall hearing about 20 years ago. You know, we've been underfunding these projects for quite some time. And it was roads, and it was all the infrastructure you cannot see. And it is, I guess, human nature that you deal with crisis that's in front of you. And by Ms. Stahl's description, we're facing some of those crises with things bubbling over. And so we want to take care of those now. And actually, as a taxpayer, I think you probably want these things to be paid for at the last moment, because you want to keep your own dollars in your pocket as long as possible. And I think that's really what we're dealing with here, is we would like to do these things at just the right time. Sometimes you miss that predictability and you get yourselves into trouble. And I think we'd like to avoid the trouble. We'd like to avoid the crisis, and we don't want to raise our rates any more than we need to, right?
Nope. I will just echo the comments of my colleagues. I appreciate it. I too vividly remember the conversation last fall where we looked really hard at all the different numbers and ultimately came up with these plans. Thank you for your thoughtful work to bring those plans to life, for the feedback you've given us tonight. I think we're on a good trajectory. No, it's not easy, but these things need to be done. To the point, the historical context will be useful to know just to tell the story, but there's no changing the past. We are where we are. We have what's in front of us, and we're going to deal with it, and we're going to deal with it in the right way, which is what I believe we're doing. So congratulations to the whole team for your hard work and how well this has been put together. And we will put ourselves, not only face today's crisis, but I would like to make sure down the line, when we're looking at this in 2032, that we're setting up future councils for generations to come so that they don't have to be in this situation, that we're being thoughtful about how we're planning deep into the future as well. Long-term resiliency so that there's no surprises.
Thank you for the feedback, and we'll incorporate all of that in our next workshop, which is currently scheduled for July 1st. So similar to last year, we had 4 workshops. This is the first one. We have one scheduled in July, August, and September. We can certainly fill up all of those times with lots of information. We're also open to condensing some of those if that's what you're interested in. So that's food for thought. Again, we're scheduled for July 1st for the next workshop. And then first and second reading are on October 6th and 20th.
Okay. Does it look good to council, or do you guys prefer to condense? All right, we're fine with the proposed schedule.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Are there any other questions, comments from council? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Rhodes, and your entire team. I know it's hard work, but we appreciate all of you and everything you do. Ms. Haley, any updates from you this evening?
I don't have anything, thank you.
All right, then I will just note that this is, nope, that's nothing from Rachel. Those are business meetings. But Ms. Morris, do you have any? I didn't think so. I will note that this is Ms. Haley's last Tuesday meeting as our interim city manager. Ms. Haley, thank you for all of your hard work and service to us. Especially these past 10 months, I know they haven't been easy. You stepped in, you took on a very big role on your shoulders. You carried it with grace and with dignity, and we appreciate everything. And obviously, we look forward to continuing to work with you back into the deputy role, a little more elevated. And Mr. Wick, we will see you in the big chair next week. All right, with that, we stand adjourned.